everybody. It's Wednesday, October 30th, and I am so excited to welcome you to Core 90 training with the community at eXp Realty, who, by the way, this week has been proving themselves again to be the greatest place for agents in the real estate community. I'm so excited. Some of the announcements that have been coming out this week are just absolutely mind-blowing. If you haven't checked that stuff out, you should, because you have new tools if you're already with us, by the way. And if you're not, come on over. So it's been a good week to be at eXp. It's good time to be alive. So thank you guys for being here. And this is part of our series that we've been doing on the anatomy of a transaction. If you pulled it all apart, what's a transaction really look like? And by the way, that might sound simplistic, but as it turns out, a lot of times deals die because even experienced agents don't exactly know what comes next or how to predict how to get ahead of things, or for that matter, how to navigate, right? I remember one of my friends when I was very new in real estate. She's very experienced, and she told me, she said, I have 18 different ways to handle that one scenario. And I was like, 18? Really? That's very specific. Like, could you name them? And she was like, I was like, oh, okay, you can. Like, that's amazing. And so what I've found is that great agents tend to know that they have a lot of tools in the tool belt, right? You're not going to use them all the time, but today we're going to learn about some amazing tools, and we're going to learn about it from one of my very favorite people, kind of the wizard of real estate in Colorado, right? And I say wizard because he's got an awesome beard. But Craig McHugh, how are you today, my friend?
I'm doing well. Yes, thank you. The Gandalf of real estate. So I'm working on the gray.
Oh man,
He has
it's
more hair than me,
beautiful.
though.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, so I think that this process is commonly misunderstood, but and I believe this to be true. I think that inspections and repairs are where most deals fall apart. Is that feel like
Yes,
an accurate statement?
that is a very accurate statement. Yeah, and I've seen stats on it too. It is the spot where most transactions either just go off the rails, end up terminating, or something I think that is equally bad, which is you poison the rest of the transaction
Yeah,
because and in some ways that could be even worse in my opinion, because you can either have you get strong armed, or the other agent, you have to strong arm the other agent, or buyers and sellers just get upset. And that in some ways could be just as bad, if not worse. That now you've got how many more weeks of everybody's just not playing well together.
that's it. Well, and then you poison the relationship big time with the other agent, right?
Yes,
Which makes them everyone feels like they're locking horns. It's dumb. Doesn't have to
yes,
happen,
right,
interestingly.
yeah.
And kind of sticking with the theme of wizards and so forth, you mentioned to me beforehand, and I know we're going to get to this later, but I like to do a little teaser, which is you have some strategies to kind of smooth that process, or maybe even help the other agent to bring some ideas to the table that maybe you helped them to have, right? So
Yeah.
I'm excited to get to some. So Craig has some super secret strategy stuff that we're going to go into today. It's going to be great.
Right.
And
I wish I had the magic like that, but it's just lots of time and gray hairs is, I
yeah,
think, the combo.
this is not the repair you are looking for.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
that'll be great. Well, so good. Well, and we're going to go everything, by the way. So if you're a newer agent and you're kind of just getting going, we're going to cover 90,000 feet today, right? Like what are the little steps? What are the processes? And since this group is all over the country, in fact, we have people who are international on the call, which is great. Yeah, guess what? We'll cover that in terms of like how it works globally, but not your state specific forms. So you're going to have to learn that from your mentor, from your state broker, from your sponsor, whoever is there to support you in your local state, or reach out to us, right? Support at thecommunitycenter.com. We'll help you out. But today we're going to not make it about one specific state. We're going to make it about how does this process in general work, which interestingly, when you zoom out, is the same everywhere, right? It really is. It's just the same everywhere. So we're going to cover that. And then we're going to go into some of the kind of micro dynamics of all of this, meaning what are the specifics? What are the little tricks of the trade that make it so that this is a win point, not just a stress point? Because you're right. This is where most of the log jams happen
Yeah.
in deals. So that's
Yes.
really good stuff. So where should
Yeah.
we start, Craig?
I think I'm gonna just give some. I think Jeff covered one of my disclaimers, which is obviously I'm in Colorado. I deal with Colorado contracts. So, I'll be sharing some thought processes and some terminology from our contracts, but I do feel like those are fairly universal. The inspection process is universal, across all real estate transactions. I don't know of any. I haven't come across any other states. It's like, no, we don't do that. I mean, it's done, and it's a valuable part of the process. Jeff touched on earlier that I think a lot of this is the first spot, short of like financing just going in the toilet at the very beginning. This is one of the first spots where, things can go wrong and go wrong in a dramatic way. And it is the number one spot where transactions fail. So that's something I think we should all be very cognizant of and try and do our very best to be prepared for it. I honestly, and I'm going to throw this out there and as right at the beginning, I feel like a lot of transactions fail because agents, and I think particularly, I'm not going to try and pick on new agents, but I train a lot of new agents, so that's sort of my paradigm. A lot of it is because they're unprepared. They are unprepared for what's about to happen, and they have failed to prepare their clients for what's about to happen. And those are two important areas I want to cover here, which is you get your stuff together and then help your client get their stuff together when it comes down to the process. So, and a lot of times I think when people discuss the inspection process, it's like we pick it up at the inspection, whether it's writing in the objection. In Colorado, we have a process that's we write an objection and then there's a resolution, and there's a lot of negotiation that happens in between there. And I think that's a fairly common process across most states. So, what can we do in the beginning to sort of try and prepare our clients for that process? And what can we do as agents to prepare ourselves for that? So, I'm going to kind of come at it. What's that?
I said, I love that. That was so beautifully and succinctly put. And I think there's a difference between like being able to present an objection without being objectionable yourself.
Yes.
And I hope we can cover that today too, because I was taught early on that you should always be an advocate for the transaction, not an adversary against the other agent. They're not they're not the other football team, right? Like you're not trying to win. The win is if you both hold hands, sing kumbaya, and skip over the finish line together, right? Because now you've completed a deal, not like you take them down and put them in a headlock and get your way. And too many agents get really hung up on this combat and I actually think they get excited about it because it creates a little bit of an adrenaline rush. But the problem is your horrifying fallout rate is the result of that thing that you're doing.
And I look at that as a tell for me, when I have an agent, whether I'm on the buy side or the sell side, when their pushback comes back and they go straight into like, knives out. I'm always, right. Okay. So, and we've talked about this on other, which is like this sort of invisible balance of power that happens, when you come at me right away and I'm just like, hey, let's get this done. And you're just like, blah. I just had this with an agent and she was just like right from the beginning. Like, I'm like, hey, I'm not sure. We need to talk about this. And she was like, whoa, like, what's going on? Why are you being so hostile? I'm like, if I was going to be hostile, like, you'd be crying right now, So like, well, I'm just trying to like have a conversation here. And she was a younger agent, newer agent, brand new agent. And she just went straight to like, stop it, Mr. Man. And I was like, okay. Like,
all right. Well, I mean, you got to just cool out, guys. I think that's the big message here. By the way, if you want your deals to stay together, don't be a dick. Like, honestly, I don't know how else to say that, but just don't. That
is the perfect way to say it. I tell people all the time, buyers want to buy, sellers want to sell. We want to get paid.
Right.
Don't be a dick. Like, let's all just play nice together.
It's super easy.
What they want.
I'm going to put that. That'll be my meme for the week. It'll be don't be a dick. Yeah, I love it. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, guys, look, the other agent's just a human being, and if they I'll tell you this much: start thinking like you're a therapist. If the other person's acting like a jerk and they're being really combative toward you, ask yourself, are they just afraid of something? Are they maybe just worried? Maybe they don't have the emotional training to deal with this situation as the stress ramps up on them. but that doesn't mean that you need to go there too. What if you were playing therapist? How could you soothe the situation, help them to feel good, help them to get what they want, and your clients to get what they want, right? Like, can you bring a meeting of the minds together and you just kind of run the middle instead of running the other side? That creates combat. So I love it. We're gonna go through that.
And I want to actually add one more little level to that, Jeff, from not a step outside of our agent hat and put on our EXP recruiter hat. I have picked up more agents from this process who say like, you were amazing to work with. I love your energy. I love working with you. I want to find out more about you and your group. And it's a great way to like, hey, I really enjoyed working with you, and I'd love to talk to you about EXP. That's all. I'm not going to say more about that, but it's a great way to like open up that door.
Obviously. Well, and at it, for anyone who's new to this and didn't know this, at EXP, if you bring some of your friends, the company provides a financial incentive. Because why? Because we don't hire recruiters, right? We just let agents bring our friends, and that there's a financial model in that. And so instead of being a jerk, you could just be nice, and that's a really great thing. But even if there weren't anything
for most agents nowadays, so
it's awesome. And I want to bring up one more heavy hitter that we have on the call who said she'd play ball with us today. Liz Boisvert out of Independence, Oregon, and she was going to be part of this color commentary today of weird nerds who wanted to talk about inspections and repairs. Hey, Liz.
I could talk about this for hours.
I bet you could, man.
This is why we make the big bucks as realtors. And it's an art. And
hold on, break that open for me.
Yeah.
That statement, this is why we make the big bucks, because by the way, Liz does make the big bucks. She's been icon like 1.5 trillion times. But like, I'm curious, what do you mean there?
Well, that's kind of, there's two sides to that, because everybody thinks we make the big bucks, right? But, there's times where you're like, wow, that was really cool. And I don't feel like I worked very hard. I'm not sure I deserved the check I got. Yeah. So it's all about perspective. And then there's other times where you work your tail off so much and you spend so many hours that you really don't feel like, it's a thankless job and it wasn't worth what you got. Yeah. So
we've made so much money though for the IRS.
Yeah. The IRS loves us. So, but to really sum it up, as far as like, that's why we make the big bucks. That is why we get paid to represent our clients, that our fiduciary duty is to protect them. And in the inspection period is the most important time to do that, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yep. I love it. So kind of sticking with our earlier conversation, don't put the douche back in fiduciary. All right. So I had to pepper that one in for today. All right. I'm off the rails, guys. So Craig, where should we start? What's the beginning of this conversation?
So I really want to talk to new agents. One little like pre-note, which is everybody's style is different. My style is I really like to function as an educator. This is what I do, but I also love to do that with my clients. And I think the inspection process is a great opportunity to really cement that trusted advisor status. And also, I look at it as, I'm going there, I'm building that relationship, but it gives me an opportunity to really like have some quality time with them and show them that I'm vested in their future and their success. That pays out in dividends in the future with referrals and future business. So, but everyone's style is different. This is my style. So I'm going to start with new agents, again, because I train a lot of new agents, and that's really where I come from. So if you are a new or newer agent that hasn't done a lot of inspections, or any inspections for that matter, you should be going to any inspection you can go to, even if it's not your own listing. Like if you have a mentor, if you have a friend, if you have a group that you're part of, like put it out there. Like I would love to go to an inspection, because the first time you go, it's a little like I don't know what I'm doing, and there's all this stuff happening, and you've got clients who are kind of jacked, and you don't know the inspector, and it's a lot. So you want to do that. I would encourage you to try and go to as many inspections as you can, even if they're not yours. The other thing I would encourage you to do is, if you have a mentor or a mentee or a mentor or somebody who's helping you train, or just another agent, ask them like, can I have an inspection report? Even if you're talking to an inspector, show me some of your inspection reports, because every inspection report, every inspector is different. Most inspection reports, some inspection reports are like, holy cow, this is like so good and so much information. And I've seen one like one page, like single space, like did it in Word. It's like, wow. So, learn how to read those, learn how to find an inspector. So ask your mentor, ask other agents in your group, try and get to inspections as soon as you can. I know everyone on my team and my group, and they're new. It's like you with me, and like they go to my inspections, they see how it goes. So, that's a really important thing.
So hold on, I'm curious really quick, and I'll ask this to both of you because Liz and Craig both, by the way, if anyone doesn't know, are super high producing agents, right? Top 1%, incredible. And so I'm curious, how do you guys pick your inspectors? I know that generally speaking, kind of the word on the street is, as an agent, we need to recommend more than one to our clients,
Yes.
right? Because we're not supposed to steer them into like, oh, this one's the one. So you got to give them like three. Three is a good number. I would say plus is fine, but you don't need to go nuts.
Right.
But how do you pick those? Who do you just phone book it? Like if anyone remembers those things.
I mean, you seem like they oftentimes they find you. I think my inspectors reached out to me. Your mentor is going to have it. People in your group or your other agents or in your office are going to have people you recommend. They sometimes just sort of fall in your lap, but talk to people in your group. Everybody has somebody who they love, and you want to interview them. You want to try different inspectors as well. I mean, it took me a while to find. I use a husband-wife team, and they work for a group called Pillar to Post, which I think they're nationwide.
Yep.
So, yeah, I now they're my people, So I always give three, and it's like, here are three. You want me to recommend one? It's like that one. Yeah, we use Pillar to Post. So, yeah,
that's great. I love it. What about you, Liz?
I think it is very important when you're starting out in real estate because you don't have any perspective. My favorite word is to lean on people around you and who they use and keep track of them. And then the next time use someone different. Don't get pigeonholed into using one, especially because you really are supposed to be giving 3 recommendations at least to your buyers and be able to actually prove that you did that. That should be in an email. I have what's called a what's next after they go under contract, and that's part of that SOP. And there are times where they're like, Liz, can you just pick one? And I will, because there's one particular inspector that I know will really fit well with them versus the other inspector, not so much. There's one person I really love to use for old homes because he reads them like a book. I love the way he inspects old homes, but I still always make sure that they have those choices.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And
go ahead.
The next thing for me to talk about, I want to also say is inexperience and it can kill a transaction, but your inspector will kill a bad inspector or an inspector who's just not vibing well with your client will kill your transaction faster than just about anything as well. I mean, I have seen inspectors, it's oftentimes newer inspectors, but it's inspectors who like everything is a 911. All the lines are red. It's like, oh, that plug is cracked. Like your dog's going to lick that plug and you're going to watch them die a horrible death as they get electrocuted. And I just like, and I've dealt with those inspectors. I've even taken an inspector inside and like, you're going to mess up this transaction if you don't stop making everything so dramatic. Stop it.
DramaQueenInspections.com is not where you want to go. Yeah. And it's such a valid point too, because I've had those inspectors, the ones who, and I think part of it for me, and then Liz, I did hear that you were jumping in there. I like framing things, right? Like in a relationship, if I go to Lexi and I'm like, we need to talk, right? Like that's it. I'm not going to be like, let's get some ice cream after that, right? Like she just automatically that would send up hairs on the back of your neck because it doesn't sound like it's going to be good news. You can frame things positively. And so for your clients, it might be positive for you to have a framing conversation prior to the inspection to be like, listen, inspectors' jobs are to get real nitpicky, to give us some stuff to think about, but they're going to make everything sound like a nightmare, and it isn't. It's okay. Every property on earth, brand new construction, they still have stuff wrong with them. It's okay. We're going to get through this. This is not like a cancer diagnosis, right? Like we're okay. All right, Liz, what you got?
I have a couple things. I was at an inspection with my buyer and I said, so-and-so's here doing the sewer scope. I'm going to finish, I was talking to someone or whatever. Why don't you go out and just see what they're doing so you can see firsthand what that's coming back. And she came back in with this look of horror on her face. And she's like, we have a serious, serious problem. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to buy this house. This is horrible, blah, blah, blah. So I go out with her and I said, well, let me talk to him. And I said, okay, blah, 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 Mr. Troublemaker. Tell me what's going on. What are we looking at? And he's like, oh, there's some roots. No big deal. We'll just blah, blah, blah. Not a big deal. But buyers, first-time home buyers in particular, it's just devastating.
Right. There's roots in the sewer.
Right. And that particular, it's turning out that I'm having that issue with that particular sewer scope person more and more. And so you'll start to learn how to preference things with the people that you have around you and your team. And that's another reason to recommend more than one, is because if there's something missed, or if they are an alarmist, or there's issues, you aren't the one that picked the inspector, right? One of the big things that I love that Sarah Chateau, she's someone in our community, and she's also a seasoned agent. Early on, she taught me to always break it down, because there will be inspections that are 80 pages long. And then there's others that aren't so bad. They're just the summary, a few things. But you look at your clients at the end and you say, okay, they're going to email you this report, and they're going to email it to me. And you're going to look through it, and then I'm going to look through it, and then we'll talk about what's important to you. But here's how you're going to break it down. Number one are safety issues. Number two are lending issues. And then usually I go in a little bit about the appraisal and what that looks like. And then number three is your wish list. And that's how I want you to look at the report, and then we'll compare notes at the end. And it really just helps them break it down in a way that for me anyways, it seems it helps a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And by the way, I just posted from ChatGPT. It's estimated that 25 to 50% of the houses in the United States have some amount of root intrusion in their sewers.
Yes.
How much was it?
25 to 50%, which, by the way, that's like 1 in 2 in case anyone's not good at math. And also, it means you shouldn't be worried about it, but you should probably buy a root intrusion company at some point. Like go own one of those.
Yeah.
Actually, Jeff, that brings up an interesting point too about, and one of the things I thought about when Liz was talking about that, and that as well, is make sure that the subs that you hire, for example, if your inspector doesn't do the sewer scope, if you bring in the guy who does sewer line replacements, it's like, what's the saying, to a carpenter, to a hammer, everything's a nail, or to a nail, everything's a hammer. Like right. I used to like bring in a sewer scope guy, and every sewer's like, oh, yeah, you need a new sewer line. That's gonna be $25,000. It's like,
there is a conflict of interest if you have someone that's diagnosing an issue that is also the same person that's supposed to fix
absolutely.
it. And that's 100%. Why you get more than one bid.
My inspector does a lot of that. He does his own scopes, and so it's really so much better. But or even worse, like when somebody brings in their own people, it's like, oh no. So let's see, estimate inspections. So make sure with your inspector you have built a relationship with them. You understand their style. You've seen their reports. I would strongly encourage you to interview those three inspectors, and then ask them like, hey, will you send me samples of reports that you've written? And I think a lot of times you can see, you'll learn a ton. So, just from looking at different inspections, but in seeing how their reports are written, see if they have a good flow to them. Because I've seen some that are just so disjointed and confusing, and cruddy pictures and bad descriptions, and I've seen some that are just like, man, I literally can just copy and paste their verbiage from the report into my objection and go. And what's cool with my inspector now, that I've actually said several times, said to him like, hey, the way you're writing that, it's really not very well written, and can you write it more like this, and then I can use it. And he's like, oh, cool. He's like, I really appreciate you like telling me that, because I don't know what y'all need. So like, you can build that enough rapport with them, like, just the language you're using is confusing. And so having that rapport with an inspector or inspectors is great.
I love it. Okay, so we've picked our inspector, and so if I'm newer, what really happened? And first off, let's zoom out and say, where in the transaction does this happen? Let's assume that we're on the buy side, right? For the moment, you can figure out the other side if you guys want. But let's assume that we're on the buy side. Where does this happen? We've gone under contract. What now?
Well, actually want to back up a little bit.
Do it.
So, because I think where a lot of people get into trouble is they go right to that. For me, I start talking about the inspection process before we ever walk through the first door.
Nice.
Because that's the time. Here, the time to start getting your client ready for the inspection is before you start looking at houses. And for me, there is a paragraph in our contract that says, I'll read it to you exactly, and I'm sure there's similar verbiage to everything, except for otherwise provided in this contract, buyer acknowledges that seller is conveying the property and inclusions to the buyer in as-is condition, where is, and with all faults. And I'll tell them, like, just so you understand, like when we look at this house, they're selling it as is, where is, with all faults. So it's, you get what you get. Now, that doesn't mean that you are stuck with a bad roof or a bad sewer line or, the furnace is broken, but it does mean like, hey, we're not going in and like that color blue, I'm not feeling it.
Wait a minute, there was pink in that bedroom? I don't remember that from the showing. Yeah.
Exactly. Or it's like, I think if we could get them to paint that room or, maybe it depends on the color of the room, but it's like you're buying the house as is, where is, with all faults. I want you, and I make it really clear to them, like, we're looking for things when we're walking through this house. We're obviously first off seeing if it's a fit for you and what you need, what your needs are. But understand like, this is what you get. And then during the inspection process, we're going to try and correct things that could hurt you or hurt your family or the structure in the near future. But we're not going in here to try to get them to remodel.
Right. And it's interesting, with all faults, by the way, just so everyone knows, means patent faults, right? These are patent defects, meaning visible warts, things that you don't like. It doesn't, right? Like that bedroom's too small. Okay, we'll deal with it. Like,
Right.
But if inside the wall to that bedroom, there's black mold and we figure that out later, that's different, right? That's house cancer. And then we might have to deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I do feel like, getting them in that mindset of how this works and you can start dealing with issues, and then, for me, the next place I go over that is when we actually are writing an offer. I know it's paragraph 10.3 in our contract. And I'm like, hey, remember when I said to you, this house, we're buying it as is, where is, with all faults. Let me read you this paragraph, exactly what it is. Do you remember we talked about that, right? Okay, so you're good with as is, where is, with all faults, minus, knowing we can go through an inspection process and look for things. We're good with that, right? Yes. Okay, let's keep writing our offer here versus, what we're just winging it when we get there. So, and then I think for me, and I would love your feedback on this too, Liz. One of the things is when we go through the door and we start looking at the house, for me, I'm not looking at what my clients are looking at. I'm paying attention to what my clients are interested in and the things that they're excited about, but I am not paying attention. I'm looking at a completely different set of things. So, because I'm trying to make sure that we're just not buying a house that when we get to inspection, we're going to find stuff. So like things that when I walk through the door, things that I'm looking for cracks on the interior and exterior walls, floors cracks, foundation cracks, doors that bind. We have expansive soils here in Colorado. Like houses wiggle a lot here. So like if I'm going to bedrooms, like I'm going in as I'm walking out, I'm pulling the door closed. And if it's like, like I can't close the door, like, this house is moving. Another thing for me is poor quality workmanship. Yeah, I'll go through this list and I'd love to hear your feedback too. Poor quality workmanship for me is huge. Home Depot Harry, who like put in the backsplash himself, and it looks like he was, 3 sheets to the wind when it happened. And it's like, okay, if it looks this crappy up front, the part I can see, I can't imagine what's going on behind the wall. You know, it's like, what else did you cut corners on? So poor quality craftsmanship, and then big systems for me, I'm looking at HVAC, huge one. Like, you know, if I go downstairs and look at the furnace, or I go in the mechanical room and look at the furnace and it's green, you know, it's 1970s green. Like, I'm thinking that furnace might be near the end of its usable life, you know? Or, you know, exactly. Yeah, Home Depot Harry. That's that guy. So, you know, HVAC system, you know, if you go outside and you look at the condenser outside and it's, you know, it's leaning and it's a giant bucket of rust and like, okay, that's going to be expensive. You know, age of the water heater. Is the water heater look old? Does it have leaks? If it's new, does it have a permit sticker on it? Like, did you do this right? Because I know what's going to happen. The inspector's going to look and I go, this is a brand new water heater. It wasn't permitted. Like, someone needs to do that. Age of the appliances, carpeting, wear and tear on carpeting. You know, just like, do you have big wear patterns? Do they clean it and it still looks bad? Evidence of water leaks, effervescence, we call it here. We get that a lot, which is the kind of that white crystally looking stuff that's on the walls. Overall, and then another one for me too, is I'm looking at is the overall condition of the neighborhood. That's a big one. You know, people don't think about that. If you're rolling in and like your neighbor, you know, you've got, you know, cousin Eddie living next door, and you know, it's just their house is falling down, or you go upstairs and you look in the backyard and it's like, you know,
Pride of ownership.
Pride of ownership. Yeah, because that's the one that your client's going to call you back and like, I hate this freaking house. You know, like, we're here to inspect that. So, you know, for us, big one another is roofs. So, you know, I'm looking at stuff that I've learned over the years is going to put me in the ditch with my inspection. And what's nice is you can also at that point address those things, right? You can be like, okay, you know, furnace is here. It's middle of winter. It's warm, but you know, this is an old furnace. You know, this is an old water heater. This carpet is really worn out. You know, kind of things that we can talk about here. So, you know, that again for me, before we ever get under contract, like I've had several. I remember one house I walked in and it had a beautiful vaulted ceiling and it had a matching 20-foot long crack that went from like pretty much the ground diagonally across the ceiling. It's like, wow, like you didn't even try to fix that one. So,
well, at least they didn't try and cover it up. I'd like to
right.
speak on what Jeff, his question was, is like, where is that at in the process? And I agree with you, Craig, that when I'm showing a home, because I'm in inspections all the time, I might be able to see something that they won't. You have to be very careful about staying in your lane because I'm not an inspector and I'm also not a contractor. But you know, this roof looks like it might be a little bit older. So we'll let the inspector let us know what his opinion is.
Yes.
But I let them, it's like, how do you feed an elephant? Like little bites, right? So the things that I might bring to their attention by the time we get to the inspection won't be so alarming. I told you my SOP for like how to break down the inspection period, but my SOP and my, I guess, script for how to break it down of what the journey will look like is, okay, we're going to find the house. You're going to negotiate the price with the seller. And then once that's accepted, we go into your inspection period. And during your inspection period, you have the right to do your due diligence. That stays between you and between you and the seller, but don't send it to your lender. That's not what the lender does. The lender comes in after you're done with your inspections and they order the appraisal. The appraisal is what verifies the value that you and the seller have agreed on. And then fourth is closing. And so I always like to break it down into little bite-sized pieces. And I start exactly where Craig does at the beginning by maybe just showing them some things that I think might be an issue. And sometimes I'm wrong, right? But when you do enough inspections, when you do, you know, 25, 30 inspections a year, you tend to be able to pick stuff out.
Well, and that's a great point, Liz, you made as well, is like that is a great time also to start to gauge your client's level of
understanding and
yeah, how much can they withstand, you know? I mean,
it's really good too to remind them that it's not financeable. And that's usually one of my first conversations before we get to the inspection is that this is how much money I'm going to need.
Right.
Let me spend your money. This is what this costs. This is what the sewer scope costs. This is what the radon test costs. And it's not financeable. It's not refundable. It's your skin in the game to make sure that you know how to, or that whether or not the house is good for you. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've
I
ever,
think-
okay, I don't know if you've ever had a buyer. Surely, I mean, maybe not, but you go and you write the offer and the offer is accepted. And then you're like, okay, so you're going to deposit your earnest money on Friday. And they're like, what's that?
Yeah.
I only made that mistake once, right? Because that can really sabotage the whole transaction if somebody doesn't have that money up front to pay for inspections and to pay for the earnest money out of pocket right away. Because first-time home buyers, sometimes they're getting in and by the skin of their teeth.
Oh yeah.
Families getting them.
They'll ask you like, can I put that on a credit card?
Yeah.
Or even worse, I had one that it's like, I don't have checks. Can I Venmo it to them? I'm like, no, I don't think so. But it's like, yeah, go to the bank. Say, bank man, can I have some checks? Like, they're really cool. And then you have to teach them how to write them. So yeah, no, but I think, yeah, those are all things that we should be doing in this process and during that leading up to that and when you get to the actual inspection part of it. So you had something you were going to say, Jeff?
Yeah, I just think this is such a great point of how would I say this? Preparing your clients for all of those upfront costs. There's an emotional cost of doing a real estate transaction, and that's real. Right. Even for experienced agents, like we just purchased a property that there's an emotional cost. Doing the process is it's emotional because it's stressful and you can't predict entirely how it's going. And anything that's unpredictable or slightly outside of your control becomes stressful when it impacts you. Right. It's like it's going to impact me, but I'm not fully in control of it. But the more that you can empower your clients with information, knowledge, and the ability to maybe see, quote unquote, the future, right? Like how many new clients have you guys had, first-time home buyers, where they're like, wait, I have to pay, how I had only saved up my 20% for a down payment or 10% or 3.5% for a down payment. Yeah. I don't have all this extra cash, right? And the lenders, you'd think, by the way, would address that with them, but they don't. Maybe some do. No. But it's fascinating. So if you can start to come up with a list, and you might be thinking like, how do I do this? Like hop on ChatGPT and be like, what are every one of the, do the crazy cat typing on the keyboard. What are every one of the costs that a client could potentially face, right? And it'll start to give you at least some idea, or just come up with a list, talk to your mentor, talk to your sponsor. But your ability to position that for your clients will dramatically empower them. And by the way, it won't blow up your deals. Maybe they've saved 3.5% for down payment because they were going to go FHA, but they didn't know that they were going to have to pay this amount for an inspection and this amount for an appraisal and this amount for, I don't know, netting up their tax account on escrow or whatever, right? Like there's a whole lot of different types of things. Lender closing costs, right? Lenders don't even talk about that stuff. Like,
I know.
Why? No. I don't understand.
The worst for us is we are
pick the right lender too,
We're a big military town here too, so we do a ton of VA loans, and we have so many first-time buyer, that are active duty or veterans, and it's an amazing benefit for the people who have proudly served our nation. But they just say it's a zero down loan, so they come to the table like, zero. Like, no, it's not zero. Like you got to put down your earnest money. You've got to put down pay for your inspection. You've got closing costs. And they're like, yeah, no, that's not how it works. Like, no, they said zero. Like, I have zero. It's like, no.
Yep.
No.
Yep. Yeah, it's fascinating. And despite I think a lot of us actually in real estate have recommended to lenders that they're become a packaged version of this for first-time home buyers, where it's like, just wrap everything in, give them one number, and then they can, it's like a flat tax, right? It would be so much easier to understand, but it's not, right? Read the IRS code. I don't even think the IRS understands the IRS code. We'll be lucky if AI ever understands taxes. So it's the same thing with buying a transaction, right? You're just going to have to present this stuff to your clients. I have a good list that I use, and I'm going to pop it. Hold on, I was looking for it, and I'm going to pop that in the chat. We'll put it down below the video afterwards. But it's just one of those things, and you'll have to keep your own list for your clients so that they know what's going on.
Yeah,
I think it's a big deal.
Yeah. So you want to go ahead, Liz. Yeah.
I think that's something that we should be doing as realtors, is you're bringing all the pieces together. I like to say I like to show them the big picture. I like to draw them a map. It's one of my parts of my script. but you're making sense of what the lender's doing. You're making sense of what the inspector's doing. You're making sense of what the other agent is doing and what the seller's doing, and really making sense of it all and helping it be as seamless as possible, because it is considered one of the top 5 most stressful things that you'll do.
Yeah, and I always use the Sherpa analogy. It's like I like Sherpas aren't important because they carry your stuff. That's important that they do that. They're important because they know how to get there and get back without killing you, because they've done it before. That's what they're paying us for. Like, so, because we're about to wander off into a minefield here of any number of kooky things that can go wrong, inspection being one of the bigger ones, and that's what they're paying us for. They're paying us for to be that trusted advisor who's done this before, and you have those scars, and you know how to go walk, you know how to climb Everest and get back alive. So, we're Sherpas. We're hired guns. That's what we do.
I love that. I'm gonna start calling us Sherpas now. I love that.
So let me put on screen really quickly because I just found it. Hold on. I just cut and paste, but if anyone wants to, just screenshot that, there it is. There's a good list of upfront costs that could affect your clients, right? I know that's not the cleanest version ever. I'll try and create a cleaner version to send out to everybody, but you need to know about prepaids and home inspections and appraisals. And by the way, a lot of these types of costs vary by market, right? Like Craig lives in a higher price point market, so inspections might be $12,000, right? Like if you're in lower Alabama, there, it's like $100 and a box of crackers. It's just, no offense. I love Alabama, by the way. And so but it's just going to vary based on the local kind of dynamics of your marketplace. I'm sure in San Francisco, it's like $3 million. And so you're going to have to just pace this stuff out. It tends to move proportionate to the cost of living. So there's like a COLA or cost of living adjustment. But insurance costs, surveys, I like a lot of this stuff. Sometimes a survey isn't necessary, but if you're buying an acreage property, right, maybe it is. You have to have reserves. So blah, blah, blah. Take a screenshot, study it later. All right. Thanks. Keep moving.
So inspection time, when it's actually time to go to the inspection, I always try and get there a little bit early, and get the lights turned on, get everything ready to go, before everybody shows up. One of the things I look for nowadays, and this is a newer thing that we have to deal with, is cameras. Like I am the camera Nazi. And even when we're looking at houses, I'm like, I'll walk up to the Ring doorbell, like, you see that right there? Like, I know they're watching us. Everything you say, they're going to hear. And I think it puts them on notice, but it also puts my clients on notice. And actually, it's funny, my clients, after we've looked at a few houses and I see cameras, they'll be like, Craig, there's a camera right there. I found it. I'm like, yes.
Yeah. By the way, you can also use those to your advantage, which is pretty great.
Yes.
you can plant some stuff in there knowing that they're watching, but you do need to be aware. And I tell you what, if you are an agent on this call and you haven't had this experience yet, congratulations. But there's always that moment where you say something dumb that should never have been documented. And then you turn around and you see a camera and you're like,
yes.
Oh, no.
I tell my clients too, like, hey, listen, if you were on the other side of that camera and somebody was in your house, and somebody said like, oh man, like, what are they, colorblind? Like, look at these colors, and it's like that person spent the last 3 months at Home Depot, looking at every swatch, okay, hey, thanks for standing on all of our tails here.
Right.
They're not gonna have to walk that one back. So cameras are a big deal. I'll also, if I see cameras and I remember them from the showing, I'll actually reach out to the agent. I had one camera. I had one that we counted 14 cameras. And,
good God, man.
Yeah. And so, I reached out to the agent like, hey, these cannot be on. We are not going to be able to have my clients get comfortable enough in this house to, feeling like we're just being, big brother to death here. So, try and, if they're there, they're there, but it also makes it uncomfortable. My whole thought process of one of the most important things for me in the inspection process is having my clients there. And I know this is a point of contention. Everybody's different, but I love my clients there because I look at it as, when you're doing a showing, you've got this really short, stressed out, moment, but I want them to go back and I want them to really start visualizing themselves in the house, and the kids stuff's going here, and this room's going to be here, and we're going to put we're going to put our sofa there, and they're falling in love with the house, and bonding with the house, because that's also part of the inspection process, because pretty soon they're going to get a report that's going to make it look like your house is a shitbox. Like everything is wrong with it. And can I say that? This is recorded.
You can say that. That's all right. We've already said Nazi and dick on here, so sorry, guys. Apparently, this is that. It's the day before Halloween, guys. It's probably a full moon. Who knew?
So yeah, it's like they're going to get this big report, and it's going to be like, gosh, like everything's wrong with this house. And so, you have to, at that, hopefully you've built some bonding for them to, they're like, okay, we can deal with that. We can deal with that. So, I look at it as a time when I get to do two things. They get a bond at the house, and actually get more time to bond with them, because, and build rapport with them. And that's, for me, that's long-term dollars, money in the bank. So,
I love that. And Casey Lynn, actually also another great agent on here. She said that's when they can go around and measure their rooms and measure the fridge and, do some of those types of, they don't necessarily have to be like up the inspector's business the entire time that they're, in fact, your inspector will probably want to murder you, because inspectors didn't take that job because of how much they love being social, right? Like there's not a nightclub in the crawl space, I promise. So they're not looking for that.
What I do with my inspector is he's great. He's super patient with everybody. But what I'll do is I'll kind of keep an eye on him. So like he always does the outside first. And so when he's done with the outside, I'll stop him and like, hey, what'd you find? And he'll kind of give us a little rundown on stuff we found. And then he goes to do inside, and, the first by floor, and like, so I'm always watching him, and like anything, or if he stops somewhere and if he stops somewhere or he gets out his tool bag and he starts like, I'm like, like we found a little jewel somewhere. So
every agent should have. I bought like a $30-$40 laser pointer off of Amazon.
Oh yeah.
So I have that, and a measuring tape in the car. So if they're like, oh, I forgot my measuring tape, I wanted to measure for my bed, like, I got you, right? Yeah. I don't recommend the agents do the measuring, but give them the tool to do the measuring.
It kind of goes back to something earlier. And anything that you end up with on a camera in a person's house, anything, by the way, guys, and I really mean this, anything that you put in writing, I'm going to pause dramatically after that. Anything that you put in writing, text message, write it on a note. I don't even care. Anything that you say in a voicemail, anything that can be taken back to you, assume that is going to be exhibit A in court.
In court one day. Yes. Yeah.
Just saying.
So that's
get ready.
Why we write stuff down is for paper trail.
Yeah. And by the way,
in case you end up in court.
And it's a good thing if you're not an idiot. It's a bad thing if you've been a dum-dum the whole way along and you're saying a bunch of stupid stuff, and then you go and you end up, and now you're having to, well, Your Honor, I didn't really mean it. Oh, okay. Yeah. License, adios. Now you're getting sued.
Yeah. And so for me, at the end of the inspection, I already have a sort of a running list of things that I think we should address. I'll point those out to the client, and then usually everybody's burnt out by then. It's like, hey, let's get out of here. They can get their house back, and we'll talk offline and start to figure out what we want to ask for in our objection. And you can also. I've been to inspections. We've all been to inspections where they get in there and they're like, I don't remember all of it. I don't like this house. It's like, okay. Fortunately, it doesn't happen very often. And my inspector always says, like, to my clients, which is nice. He goes, Craig doesn't let his clients buy crappy houses. So it's like, no, I don't, because I want to sell houses. I don't want to have to go back and do that again. That's my least favorite part, is looking for houses. So the paid part is the best. So,
okay, so let's change gears. So in the inspection process, we've gone through this, we've hired the inspector, they come back, and now we get the 146-page report of why this house is not worth buying.
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
That you have to walk your, hey, here's the horrible bad news, right? It just looks like you go to the doctor, you don't even get this much information. I've never gotten that much information from a single doctor. Every home inspector for a few $100 is able to give me 6,000 pages worth of devastating news. And so I wish my doctor was that thorough. That's all I'm saying. But what's interesting is, how do you then, first off, present that with your client? How do you have that conversation? How do you guys handle that, right? And then how do you pare that down? Because you can't just go back to the seller and be like, yep, change every outlet. We don't like them. You know, like what's next? How do you go from that to not a sale fail?
If you've laid the groundwork earlier on, it's a lot easier. So for example, I always, we're looking for, major mechanical, structural, life safety are the big ones. And I talk about that with my clients a lot. It's like, that could hurt you. That could hurt your family member. That's going to break. That's eminently going to fail. So if you're talking about life safety, structural, major mechanical, and you just sort of keep coming back to those things, the other, of the 130 things on the list, there's 3 or 4 or 5 that are like, we need to talk about these and figure out what that looks like, or this is something we should be asking for. Is that something we can warrant with, the home warranty? Or is it just something that just straight up like, no, that thing, there's a giant leak there. That furnace is shot. There's a hole in the roof. There's structural damage. And, there's hopefully, you haven't found structural damage in, something so incredibly bad you have to terminate, but it happens sometimes. You missed it, or it just was the inspector saw it. But for me, it's like I've already coached them on, like, we're looking for big things that are going to hurt you or your family or the structure in the near future. I say that a lot. And then they're ready for that.
Totally. What about you, Liz? So you get this inspector report back. Usually it's all in red, right? It looks like you just failed an exam in high school. And now you're going through it with your clients. They're freaking out. They've got a nosebleed. There's another house that just popped up on Zillow that they're all excited about. How do you navigate this moment, right?
Sure. First, you have to tell yourself it's your fiduciary duty to honor what they want. It's not your fiduciary duty to keep the deal together, right? But giving them your perspective, because you see them all the time, is super helpful. I mentioned to you that I break it down with safety, lending issues, and wish list. But I've done that a while ago. And then I reiterate that. I have them go through their inspection. I go through their inspection. And I tell them to put in the email what they feel is important to them. And sometimes I'll get that email and I'll be like, huh, that's a lot. Now with, so we'll talk on the phone and kind of break it down one by one if we need to. And then sometimes I get their lists and I'm like, there's some things we should probably ask for, because I have the perspective of the questions I've asked about seller motivation, or, things I know just from doing this as long as I have, of what I've been able to extract from the transaction so far. Just honoring what they really want, being a really good soundboard, being a soundboard for your clients. Sometimes I have them call the inspector and ask additional questions.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'm like, okay, we're going to get a bid on this, because bids help you negotiate, because nobody wants to write a blank check. So if the roof needs to be likely replaced, then you get a roofer. And then maybe even get 1 or 2. Because that helps everybody know that number is accurate. If I would have known when I first got into real estate, I asked a veteran, a top producer, what was her secret to her success. And she said, it's my database. But she wasn't necessarily talking about her past client database. She was talking about her contractors.
Her trades. Yep.
Her trade. And I didn't get it at the time, but now it is one of the top 5 most important things.
I was about to say that. Yeah, it's like
having a contractor or a person of trade that you can call within this tight time frame that you have, because we have deadlines to deal with, and say, like, I really need you to give me a bid. And they know that they may never get the work, but there will be some work that I'm able to give them because we do this enough that it works in their favor. So having the right contractors that do good work, but also can perform pretty quickly, is super important. And then I just write up the addendum with the exhibits. right?
Yeah. Yeah, and let's talk about that. So, I mean, for me, my you call it the addendum. We do an objection. You know, for me, when I'm writing that objection, there are two main things that I'm trying to achieve. The first one for me is to transfer liability to somebody. So, you know, if there's a plumbing issue, I want a licensed plumber to do that, right? Because what does a licensed plumber have? They have insurance, right? Yeah, I want a licensed roofer. I want a licensed plumber. I want trades that are professional and they have liability. Because you know, if your client goes in, it's like, you know, a client's like, oh, I've got this sweet crescent wrench I bought, and I can do that. I can repair that water leak myself. It's like, okay, what happens if when, you know, a month from now and your sweet repair breaks? And I said, you're the one that's going to do it. You know, seller agrees to repair the water leak versus seller agrees to hire a licensed plumber to do that. You know, so I always coach my clients on that as well. Like, because there's ongoing liability. If you do something stupid and somebody gets hurt or the house gets severely damaged because you didn't know what you were doing, there's liability there. You know, if we hire a licensed professional to do that and something goes wrong, guess what? Call that guy. Like, don't call me. Don't call my client. Like,
Totally.
call.
Well, and I want to hand this right back to you, but it took
Yeah.
me 5 years before I ever asked anybody what does licensed, bonded, and insured mean. I find that a lot of agents actually don't really know what a bond is for their
Right.
contractors, but it's another type of insurance that if
Yes.
the work is done poorly or incomplete, right, then that bond company can step in. Insurance will maybe cover the property, but the bonding will actually cover the work. So you do want that level of insurance, especially for major systems repairs that could be happening, especially if you're actually asking for that work to be done. And it might sound like a pain in the butt where they're like, well, I've got Home Depot Harry, or I've got Bob, my handyman, who can knock that out for $20. It's like, yeah, that's great. But if Bob burns the house down, somebody's paying the bill, right? And I'd rather it be the insurance company, not Bob, who probably, because he's getting paid $20, doesn't have the money to rebuy the house.
Right. And that for me
What
also
if
even
Bob
goes
falls off a ladder while he's at your house and
Right.
handicaps himself the rest of his life?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
And that also
We
goes
have
to
to
me
bury
really
him.
with home warranties, which is a whole nother area. But you
whole
know,
other area.
yeah, I mean, but I always feel like home warranty again pushes liability off of your client. You know, it's like my biggest fear is like, okay, we'll take the furnace as it is, and day after closing, or you know, it's like, hey, the furnace stopped working, and I've had that happen. It's like, hey, there's the warranty. Like we provided you with something to fix, you know, that would pay to fix things like that. So I know warranties are can of worms, and we're not going to get into that too much. But so the other thing for me when I'm writing my objection that I'm trying to do is I am trying to minimize the other agent having to think.
Okay, talk me through that, because I think this is a really interesting point. And you brought this up on a leadership call that we were on together.
Yes.
But how do you do this? Because this is like some voodoo mind meld stuff, but it's also awesome. And actually, I think it's really just good strategic agency. How do you work that?
Right. So the thought process is, and one of my mentors taught me this a while ago, and I just changed the way I do inspections is, you know, if you write an objection that is not well written or kind of open-ended, you are inviting the buyer's agent to rewrite it when they send over their resolution, right? And so what happens in that process is you are now engaging their fiduciary duty, their duty to make sure that they are taking the very best care of their client. And so what are they going to do? They're going to write that it slanted towards what's best for their client, right? So you know, the way that I write my inspection objections is what a lot of agents will do. For example, let's use an example of there's a leak in the toilet in the master bathroom, right? So I mean, I've seen inspection objections like there's a leak in the toilet in the master bathroom. Okay. So now what do I have to do? I have to write a resolution and figure out who's going to repair that leak. How, so I am now automatically engaged to advocate for my client, right? So the way I write an objection is I do it kind of twofold. So for example, that same leak, I will start by stating what the problem is, right? So I'll start by saying, inspector identified a leak in the toilet in the master bathroom that could be causing damage to the structure around the toilet, right? So now I've stated there is a problem, and the problem is causing something in that life safety, mechanical, structural, right? So it's like you can state it in a way that it has more impact. I'm not worried about the leak because we're never really worried about the leak, right? We're worried about what the leak did. Okay.
Right, because you can stop a leak.
You can stop a leak, but if it's been leaking for 5 years and the toilet's about to fall through the floor, bigger problem, right? So I'll write, inspector identified a leak in the master bathroom toilet and could be causing damage to the surrounding area. And then,
do you reference like a page number on the inspection report or an item number?
That. Yeah, I have done that, but they're going to get the report, but I normally wouldn't do that, but you could do that for sure. The next step that I write is I write the next sentence. I want the buyer's agent to copy and paste the next sentence. Whatever I write next, I just want them to copy and paste it and put it into their objection. I don't want them to think. I want them to just copy and paste because it's just that it's all there, right? So what I'll say in the next sentence is seller agrees to hire a licensed plumber to evaluate and correct the leak and check for any additional damage around the toilet.
Bingo, you're literally writing it as though you're the listing agent.
Exactly. And I can't tell you, it is one of those, it's one of those few like Jedi mind tricks that I found in my career. And for me, the best day when I get a resolution and all they did was copy and paste what I wrote. Because I know, I'm not going to have it be like, because if I leave it wide open, they'd be like, seller agrees to repair the leak on the toilet. Nope, I don't want that. So yeah.
Liz, I think you're muted. Hold on, but I want to hear what you have to say.
When you receive a counter back on a repair addendum, be very diligent and read every single word, because one little word can change the complete outcome of a scenario.
Yeah.
Like they leave out the word licensed, or if you really intended repair and they put replace, but they put repair.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could give you some examples of how I've gotten burned on that, but I can't recall. But you will. Actually,
those are pretty good because
you will get
replace versus repair. It's a common one.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the ones that I like is use certify in good working order, because that forces whatever that trade is to have to certify that, it's in good. I use that a lot with furnaces. So, seller agrees to hire a licensed HVAC contractor to clean, service, and certify the furnace and HVAC and HVAC system in good working order. And I can't tell you how many times it's like, I cleaned it, I can't certify it. That thing's a piece of junk.
Be sure to use
and
that
then
word.
they have to come back to me with like, hey, it's not certifiable. And then they kind of come back sometimes like, is that cool? It's like, no, it's not cool. Like, your guy, you hired him.
Yeah.
Like, I like that you use that word, Craig, because I use clean, tune, and certify, or no, clean and tune, I think are the two I use. But adding in that certified really is what it is. Like I'm totally stealing that from you. Thank you.
And a lot of stuff with trades, because they may be able to fix the problem or like certify that the floor under the toilet is not damaged in any way. It's like I stopped the leak, but that's
the trickiest part of our job, right? We're not supposed to write contracts as like we're lawyers, and that's exactly what we do in this particular instance. And it's really, really a skill. That's my least favorite part. I sweat about it.
Although it is part of why, and I heard somebody say this the other day, or maybe today, but sorry, getting older apparently, where it was like, literally, this is why we get paid the big bucks. But I actually do agree. Look, if your job as an agent was to find somebody who needed to buy a house, eventually everyone, and then just write up the contract, which a computer can do, then you would have zero value. Right. Like you would have zero value. The point of our job is to be able to be a fiduciary, right? To work on behalf of your client's actual wishes, not yours, not your paychecks, not your bank accounts. And then also to be able to help them to navigate this and to negotiate, which is a challenging thing. And I wanted to show just really quickly for anyone who wants to like take a peek at this. Hold on. Here's a list of, like, I just pulled this together, just a list of sample inspector items. These are the types of things that you might have come back. And there's stuff on here, like if you get a list like this from an inspector, I would say this is a small list for me. Like sometimes people are like 18 items. I'm like, I've seen 118 items. It doesn't matter. Your job is to sort through it and to determine what's cancer and what's a wart, right? There's difference. If I go to the doctor and they're like, you got a little spot on your arm, I'm like, great. But if it's metastasized into your brain, we need to know about that, right? Like that's different. And we want to know. That's the same thing with an inspector. Some things are like your laundry room dryer vent clogged. Okay, I can have, Home Depot Harry come and fix that. Hopefully he knows how to reattach it, but I'll check it. I don't know. Like I'm less concerned about that than we've had a leak for 5 years and the subflooring has 5 inches of water, or whatever. There's a problem that we can't overcome. And your job, by the way, as an agent, part of your job is to learn how to look at a list like this one and find the really, truly horrific stuff that needs to be addressed and help contextualize the rest of it for your clients. Like, wait, there's missing carbon monoxide detectors? I'm not buying the house. It's like those are really cheap, guys, and we can buy them on Amazon. Who freaking cares? They plug into the wall. Like, it's not a big deal, right? But a cracked tile in the entryway, that goes back to Craig's earlier point of with all faults. Like that was obvious. We could see the cracked tile in the entry. Although, by the way, start looking under rugs. I just want to tell everyone that
rugs are huge.
Look under rugs, guys. Like there's stuff hiding under rugs. But
yeah, all the dirty secrets are under the rugs.
Part of your job. So yeah.
Well, you brought up an interesting point too, which is on my list as well. And this is actually kind of a bigger picture thought process, but it's important in terms of, I tell my new agents too, especially the ones that want to give away all their commission to get the deal. This is a moment where, a lot of times some portion of our commission is used to grease the skids of this whole transaction, and this is one of those spots where, like, you mentioned carbon monoxide detectors. It's like, I'll buy don't worry about that. I got that, and I've bought everything from carbon monoxide detectors to refrigerators. I messed up on one. They're friends of ours, our client. Every time we go to their house for dinner, she loves to remind me, like, and that's the refrigerator that Craig bought for us. I'm like, yeah, I love that, but it's like $1,000. So yeah, there are times in this process where it's like, and I was talking, I think it was yesterday, we were talking, somebody's like, you're just deadlocked, and you can do that. It's like, you're down to $100 something or other that needs to be fixed. It's like, I'll hire my handyman. I'll have him there in 2 hours and we'll fix it. I'll pay for it. It's fine. Let's move forward.
Hey, Craig and Liz. So I'm curious, and sorry, Liz, I just cut you off. Go ahead.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
So when you're going through this process, to what extent does some of this negotiation happen offline? And here's what I mean, right? Like if Liz and I are doing a deal, and I'm on the buy side, she's on the list side, I know she's a strong agent. I may call up and say, hey, we got some stuff back. Most of it's inconsequential. I'll talk my clients through that and I can rub their backs and, put them back to bed. But we do have 2 things to think about, and just wanted to kind of have a quick meeting of the minds and get everyone's temperature before I send some paper over and we make everything official. Do you guys do a lot of that, or are you just like, no, contractor, screw yourself? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's critical. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Craig.
I think it's critical. Yeah, I mean, especially if we got something that's really like a whoa, like a furnace is bad or the roof is bad, and it's something that is going to be an issue. I've I always reach out and like, hey, I know, I know this is going to be a big one, but what's your client's comfort level? Like, I know, what can we do on that? We have a huge problem with roofs here in Colorado.
Yeah.
Average age of a roof here is 7 years from hail damage. So
Oh yeah. What in the
yeah,
hail? All right.
yeah.
So Liz, I'm curious with you, same deal. Are you doing some offline,
It's just like
conversation?
yeah, just like with my, clients with my buyers that I start giving them bite-sized pieces. I
Hmm.
do the same thing with I call him the OB, the other broker. With the other broker,
Love
I
it.
call and just say, just so you know, I'm going to start working on bids. I don't know if you would like to start doing some as well, but the sooner you can get them involved as a problem solver, the faster the whole process will go. Because if you wait after days of getting bids, going through all this with your buyer, and then, you're at the end of your inspection period, so you deliver this thing, well, they haven't had any time to digest it with their clients.
Right.
And then
And
you're going to end up looking at an inspection, which is
that's it.
also an inspection for the appraisal, which means you'll delay your closing.
And I will say, if I'm the listing agent and you are, and by the way, if I find that newer agents tend to participate in the industry more on the buy side than the list side. And that just is true. So as you progress onto the list side, you'll understand this. But if you're a listing agent and you get suddenly smacked with a ginormous repair request, and you had no idea it was coming, it almost feels offensive, right? Because it's like, dude, you could have just called me and we could talk through some of this, but now what you've done is drop something on me that I have to show to my clients today, and I've got dinner plans. Like, right? Like this is annoying. So can we have a conversation first? I think some smoothing there. And by the way, I love a conversation that doesn't feel threatening, where I'm like, listen, there's a couple things that popped up. I just wanted to talk with you so that we don't have to end up in combat. Let's figure out how to navigate this thing together. Let's keep the deal together, right? Like
Yeah.
when I start with that and frame it with the other agent, then they don't feel like they have to like, let me grab my sword and He-Man or She-Ra, or whatever. Like we can just participate in a civilized conversation, figure out what might be possible, go back to our clients, present them with some options.
Well, and what's interesting about that, Jeff, too, is there is this perception. I was for me, it was like, okay, I at first I always assumed like, the sellers don't know any of this stuff. So the sellers almost always know that, like, they know the furnace is 35 years old. They know that the roof, that they had a hailstorm that, like, not only took out their, they had to replace both their cars, but, or even worse here, they know they filed the insurance claim, kept half of the money, and never did the roof.
Uh-huh.
Like,
And by the way, they have their fingers crossed and they just said 26 Hail Marys that you're not
yeah.
going to find the damage that they don't want you to find.
Right. Oftentimes they find it. And then, we talked about this a little bit the other day, and it was interesting too, because as is, I think we should talk about that real quick. As is, like, you'll get it right from the agent from the beginning, like, hey, this is an as is contract. Like, we're not doing anything. And, if my clients really want it, I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm still going to inspect, but I'm in our contracts, we have a right to just straight terminate from inspection, or we can object and resolve. So I'll just say, hey, we're just going to terminate if we find anything bad enough. And at first that was a little ballsy at first, and then I realized, like, you know what, if I find something bad enough, if I find a material defect, something that is like, like it's gonna be fit, like it needs a roof, guess what, I figured out, like, I'll call that agent up and go, hey, we're gonna have to terminate. Wait, whoa, why? Well, it needs a new roof. I'm sure you knew that. It's like, and guess what? That material defect is a material defect for you. It's a material defect for the next person they go under contract on, and the next person they go under contract on. Like, you can capitalize on that and go like, hey, figure out how to get this thing fixed. File an insurance claim. Let's get it done.
So Liz, I want to pass to you. And by the way, just quick term for everybody, material defect, because we covered patent and latent earlier, right? Latent means hidden,
Right.
patent means visible, material means big. All right, Liz. How do you deal with this, the conversation with the other agent and setting some kind of expectations before ever going to contract?
Before going to contract?
Meaning let's say I'm on the buy or you're on the buy side, I'm on the list side. You're going to send me a repair addendum and there's 3 ridiculously big items that are going to need to be discussed. Do you call me first, or do you just send over a contract that says fix all this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going back to what I said a bit ago, that I start feeding them the bite-sized pieces to get them to get the
Right.
bid so that they're involved as a problem solver instead of being blindsided.
Yeah. I love
I
that.
think Kevin had a question about, because I know we're
Yeah,
running
that's a
like
really good.
pre-inspections. Did you guys
Yeah.
see that?
Yeah.
Pre
And
I know,
inspection.
I have a feeling I know how Jeff feels about pre-inspection.
don't do pre-inspections. And
Craig
I had
also
a
doesn't
new
like.
broker who said, he said, guess what you've just created? A giant disclosure. Like you
Yeah.
now have to, in your seller's property disclosure, like you have to disclose all of that stuff now, and now you've just kind of made those buyers nervous. So
What are your thoughts on them, Liz? Because by the way, I've heard top agents go both directions on this
Yeah.
one, just so everyone knows. So there's not a right answer. I'm also anti pre-inspection for the same reason Craig just identified. But that's one guy's opinion. Who cares? Liz, what's your opinion?
It's part of my listing script, with my seller, because really it's up to them. And I like all my clients to know all of the options that they have available, because some people really, really don't like to be caught off guard. And they really want to have the opportunity to take care of things before they're in a situation where they're negotiating.
Like big stuff.
Big stuff. Yeah. They would rather know it. Most people don't, though. Most people, they're like, no, I want the buyer to take care of their own inspections and I'll deal with it when we get there.
Well, and that's the funny piece for me is, right, like you can do a pre-inspect, and I would say this to a seller. You can do a pre-inspect. If you find out it's got a bad roof, you have two options. One, disclose that it has a bad roof, or two, fix it. Your third option is don't do the pre-inspection. And if you have a bad roof, it might just go through the transaction. The buyer may not care. Like,
yeah.
Sounds weird, but that happens literally all the time. So
yeah.
Why give them a punch list going into it? Let them figure out what their thresholds are on their own.
Have you guys ever heard when someone goes, well, I fixed everything, but I left one thing, because people like to have that one thing to fix? I don't even know if that, I've heard that at least.
Hopefully it's not one really bad thing, like the furnace or like the hole in the room.
I think there is
a hole in the wall, because there
is something I love as I would say on the listing side, I love giving up easy stuff, right? So if you send me a long list, I might negotiate hard on one item and just give up on all the easy stuff that I know we can knock out for basically no money, because that's easy stuff, right? Oh, it's missing a little bit of paint on the southeast corner. It's like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. I don't care. So that's easy stuff. But like needs a new furnace is maybe the one item where I'm like, let's consider a little financial accommodation, barely. I don't know. We'll come up with something that works for all parties, but
I gotta say this. Floyd is, gosh, I'm so stoked to have him as part of our team here, because he used to be an investor. He is an investor. So he just has that mindset of problem solving. But anyways, he said, well, one of the big things about pre-inspection is the buyer will likely still get their own inspection. And then they're going to find other things, because each inspector is human and each inspector has a different set of eyes. So just because you do a pre-inspection doesn't mean it's going to get you off the hook of doing things.
No. It probably, most times, I would argue that most times it just really increases costs for the seller, which diminishes their net position, meaning how much money they walk away with.
Right.
Net position, how much they net, right, on the seller net sheet. And it's like, why just add a cost for it? Doesn't even really provide peace of mind. They're still going to find something later.
Yeah. Agreed.
So yeah, that's an interesting one. Okay, so now we've helped pare down the process. And by the way, if you're a newer agent, the very best thing that you can do is get someone to mentor you through this. Like honestly, because you just don't have enough experience to know what's big and what's bad. And in the absence of perspective, everything looks like a big deal.
And
right?
Get more than one.
For sure. That's a great point, right? Because you might come to me and I'm like, oh, that's a big deal. And you go to Liz and she's like, that's easy.
No, let's do
Jeff's
that.
a dum-dum, right? Like, come on, right? So, and by going to different agents, you'll get different perspective, and then you can start to come up with your own
perspective.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
that's good. But so what happens next then? So then the seller kicks back, usually in most states, there's some opportunity to counter, right?
Yeah.
And how does that tend to pencil out? Craig, you start.
I think it's almost like it's so out of your control. It just depends on, hopefully you've laid some groundwork with the other agent, and if they're a good agent, they're going to call you up and go like, hey, what about this? This was really important to them. And I love that. I hate when an agent's just like, send it, and it's like, no, this is it. We just had one, like the radon came in to point, is it four picocuries is the max, and it came in at like 2.1, and they're like, they want a radon system. They just said it in the resolution. It's like, well, it didn't test high. It's like, no, but they still want it. It's like,
Sure.
okay, well, I want a lot of things. Like,
Yeah. Well, my buyers want to win the lottery, but come
I
on.
know. It's like, so, it's like sometimes it's just crazy. Good agents will reach out and be like, yeah, hey, this is great. Hopefully you've talked to them, you've laid the groundwork, and then, you have to go back to your clients. And then it's like, hey, this is what they want. Let's work through that and try and like, get to everybody happy.
Liz, I saw you just raise your hand on that one. What are you thinking?
Yeah. One thing I think that we really need to talk about in this part is it price reduction? So let's say there's a bunch of stuff that needs to happen. One of the things you really need to pay attention to in your repair addendum is, are you asking them for a price reduction, which will really not change your buyer's payment very much. But sometimes that's what's important to them, right? Because again, this is your client and what they want. But the price reduction, closing costs, which would actually put that money in your client's pocket, but allows them to pick the inspectors they want. But guess what? If you've already asked for all the closing costs up front and they're already paying for that, then you no longer have that option.
Yeah.
So it's important to know what the max is for the loan and the down payment that they have. And that's a great question for the lender. And then third is to actually have those repairs done by the seller, right? Just like the seller is going to have this done by closing, and your buyer's willing to postpone that closing date. And I suppose there's even a fourth variable, because a fourth variable would be, and hopefully there's no lenders listing, but that would be to have the bids paid for out of escrow, out of the seller's proceeds. And the escrow knows that the buyer's, that the buyer's agent or the buyer is going to hold those checks. But as far as the lender's concerned, the lender thinks that those repairs have already been done, and that's why they're being paid out of escrow.
Sure.
Yeah, good luck. I do that. I do that frequently. A lot of times it's like, hey, you get your own, they brought a bid and it's reasonable. It's like, hey, we'll pay for it out of proceeds. But one thing I want to mention about price reductions for newer agents, be super careful with price reductions, especially lately. Lenders are very savvy, and if they see all of a sudden that week 2 or 2.5, it's like a $10,000 price reduction, they know. They know, like, hey, there's a bunch of something's being not done and money's
Pick
going
your lenders
back.
Carefully.
Pick your lenders carefully. But because what happens at that point is, if you haven't had this happen, is the lender will be like, what just happened right there? And you don't want to do loan fraud bad.
Right.
You have to say like,
Right.
oh, yeah, in lieu of repairs, or even worse, right, in lieu of repairs, we're going to give you $10,000 in your resolution.
Yeah.
But, and then the lender's like, I've had this happen. I had a lender one time like, oh, yeah, we want to see the report.
Right. Yeah. If you use the word repairs, it's like, if you use the word repairs, it's like sending up a flare in front of an underwriting team.
That lender came back and said, we want everything done.
Yeah.
Everything in the report done now.
If they get their hands on the inspection or repair addendum, they could very well do that. And that's why I said that what happens in the inspection period is between you and the seller. That's why I said, don't
never forget who owns that house.
To the lender.
You get to live there, the lender owns the house. And if they think there's things wrong with their house, they want their house in good order.
Yep.
So,
well, and again, I agree with you guys. You're not trying to commit loan fraud. Look, the lender didn't ask for the report. Don't freaking send it to them.
Right. Don't give the lender anything they don't ask for.
Don't send it to them. And by the way, anything that you send to your lender has to, in certain guidelines internally, go to their underwriting team. So you just need to understand, even a text message to your loan broker, who, by the way, is not the underwriter, they're usually an awesome person, which is great, but their job is to be front of house. They're friendly, they're awesome. They take the application, they submit it to people who are good at math, right? Like, that's what happens. And just so you know, those people who are good at math are doing risk-adjusted returns for a person who's going to package this deal and sell it to Fannie or Freddie or a secondary mortgage loan company, right? There's some servicing company that's thinking about buying this thing, and they need to make sure it's saleable. If you say, hey, there's a bunch of crap wrong with it, and you didn't have to say that, you're dumb. Don't do that. And by the way, a couple other options, and I put this in the chat. Yes, you can ask for repairs. Sure, that's kind of the most baser level thing that you can do. You can ask for a price adjustment, sure, but I would agree with Craig and Liz. That can also start to create a conversation with the lender. You can change terms on the deal. And by the way, remember that in negotiations, there's price versus terms. Sometimes it's like your price, my terms, or my price, your terms. we can flip it around, right? That could be the length of closing. That could be whether or not you're comfortable with a contingency that wasn't there before. It could be, and I put this in here, personal effects like a lawnmower, riding lawnmower, maybe the classic car that's in the garage. I don't know, whatever. People can leave stuff in the house, and that could be part of the negotiation. It's not a big deal. You can terminate, you can change closing costs. There's a lot of stuff. There's actually probably a longer list than even just this, but trying to give you some options.
Yes.
It's good stuff. Okay, so we've submitted that. The seller has come back. Hopefully we've sort of agreed, but now we've set up timelines. Who's tracking these timelines? Who's making sure that all of these crazy contractors who, God bless, I hope they all show up on time and actually do their jobs. Like, how do you navigate that? And what happens if we start getting behind?
Yeah. No, I think obviously it's up to the seller to do that. But, one of the things I always write in my resolution is I want to see sometimes, I want to see all repair receipts 48 hours prior to closing.
Sure.
Because I've had them like before, like it didn't do that. And they show up with like, here are the receipts. And it's like, well, where's the rest of them? It's like, that's all of them. It's like, well, we're at the closing table. Like, what am I supposed to do now? So it's like, get those repairs, get those receipts. But yeah, I mean, the nice thing in our market, and I'm sure it's true everywhere, is, the inspection resolution survives closing. So if they don't do it, you continue, they still are, required to do it.
I believe that's true in most markets.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but,
I'd like to add on that because I know we're getting short on time, but it's good to remember. I wish someone would have told me sooner, when I was a baby agent, that if you have to extend the closing, or not the closing date, the inspection period, which is also the appraisal period, right? That's exact same date. Then you may have to extend the closing date. So you need to have that off record conversation with your lender that, like, when does their lock expire? Especially if you're in a market where the interest rates are going up, because your buyer might have to pay for an extension. And so you don't want to have be concentrating on negotiating so hard to get, everything you have to do and then botch their great interest rate.
I totally agree. And by the way, just for everybody, as a quick, fully legally compliant way to have that conversation with your lender, you call them up, even if you're only doing one deal, and you say, hey, I need some advice. Hypothetically, if this were happening in a deal that you and I were involved in, just hypothetically, right? Like, how would you want me to proceed? Mm-hmm. How could we keep that deal, that hypothetical deal, having nothing to do with any deal that we're in, together, right? And that's a conversation that they could have with you and answer that question in full vulnerability, but nobody has to now disclose. There's no disclosure obligation because you're having an offline conversation. And by the way, it could be hypothetical. Maybe it is hypothetical. And
I've gotten to the point now where I try to get most repairs done post-closing. So I'll ask the buyer, if I have the buyer, we're going to get a quote, let's say, it needs the toilet repaired or whatever, bigger stuff normally.
Yeah, because then the buyer has the power.
Yeah, and then I'll just put it in the contract at the time of closing. At the time of closing, seller agrees to instruct the title company to draft a check in the amount of whatever the number to ABC Plumbing. And then at closing, here's the checks for all the work that needs to be done. You get your subs to do it. You get your people to do it. We're not pushing closing because—
And you could even get more bids too.
Yep.
Which is never a bad idea.
Yeah. It's like, we can put into the resolution, like, we'll give you up to $1,000 for that repair.
No.
And you get the bids. You provide the bids prior to closing, and we'll instruct title to draft checks.
And don't lose, and I know we are at time. Thank you, by the way, Liz. We could have kept going for like the rest of the day.
We could just keep going.
Here's what's fun. Don't forget that you have an opportunity in these moments to use some conditional verbiage, right? So if I'm talking to Craig, and it's not a bad thing to do, and if Craig's on the buy side, I'm on the list side, and he says, listen, we really, it does need a new roof. And I might say, listen, if the sellers are willing to do this roof thing or to give their— do you think the buyers would? And then I might position another terms moment or a pricing or something, right? Like I might use that lever to try to get something for my guys. Why? Because I'm a fiduciary on their behalf, and and I might position this before I've even talked to the sellers. Do you think that if the sellers were to do this, that your buyers might do that, and we can just full conditionalize that entire scenario so we can come to something where I'm like, if we scratch your back, can you scratch ours? That's not inappropriate. Don't lose that moment because there is an opportunity there. You may not get everything and that's okay, but you should try.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like the thought process, and I do this even with my people on my team. It's like, they know me now. Like, if they come in my office and like, hey, I have a problem, it's like, great, what's the solution? Okay, yeah, even give me 3 solutions, and I'll pick the best. I'll help you pick the best one. So, I mean, you can do that with the other agent too. Hey, I think it's going to need a roof. Here's some ideas I have on how we can get that accomplished and keep moving forward without, make sure everybody's happy, So, don't just be like, needs a new roof. What are you going to do about it? It's like, come to the table with solutions.
I love it. Okay, so hopefully you guys, and by the way, I love this full dialogue that we've been having about the anatomy of a transaction. And I want to give everyone a heads up that next week we are bringing in a panel to talk about some of the humongous ahas. We're breaking our pattern a little bit from EXPCon, but our leadership group met this week and said, you know what, we need to break down. There's some big stuff happening with EXP. So I can't even stop smiling. So exciting, really incentivizing some key elements in the company and also providing you with extra tools for no extra cost to do the work that we all do that's so important. And so I'm excited for that. We'll be doing that next Wednesday, same bad time, same bad channel. In the meantime, Liz Boisvert, you're incredible. Craig McHugh, you're incredible. Thank you guys both. For providing so much value for everyone. Well, thanks for providing so much value for everyone. I'm just here for good looks, that's all. But I appreciate it. And this is such a great topic. Hopefully you guys are walking away with some extra tools in your tool belt and feeling a bit more confident. And if you don't, reach out to me, reach out to Craig, reach out to Liz, ask a question, ask your mentor, ask your broker, ask somebody with more experience than you because success leaves clues. Thanks, you guys. Really appreciate everyone. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.